We picked the date together. June 11th, the day she said she dreamed of since she was a girl. I bought her dress, paid the venue deposit, even wired money for invitations. She called me my future husband every day. Then, one morning, I woke up and her phone number was disconnected. The venue said no one paid them. Her Facebook was gone. She vanished. Not just from my life, but from every trace of it. I didn't lose a wedding. I lost the future I thought we were building together. And the worst part is I still wear the ring I bought for her. Not because I want her back, but because I need to remember how far I fell. My hands won't stop shaking. It's 3 a.m. here in Puerto Princesa, and Shanika still hasn't called me back. The hotel room feels like a tomb. Outside, the Philippine night hums with insects and distant music. But all I can hear is the blood pounding in my ears. I've called her 17 times since yesterday afternoon. Each call goes straight to that cold recording. The number you have dialed is not in service. Not in service. Like she never existed. Shanika, baby, please call me back. I whisper into the darkness, my voice cracking like I'm 16 again. But I'm 61, and tomorrow I'm supposed to marry the woman who disappeared. I pull up our text thread. The last message she sent was Tuesday at 2:47 p.m. See you for cake tasting, my forever husband. Love you so much. 3 days ago, 3 days of silence before our wedding. I can't sit still anymore. I throw on clothes and rush downstairs to the lobby. The night clerk looks up from his newspaper, eyebrows raised. Sir, everything okay? I need to get to the Astoria Palawan. I tell him, my voice desperate. My fiancée, she's supposed to meet me there tomorrow for our wedding. I can't reach her. The clerk's expression shifts. Something flickers in his eyes. Pity, maybe. Sir, the Astoria closed for renovations last month. No events until September. The words hit me like a freight train. No events. But Shanika confirmed everything just last week. She sent me photos of the banquet hall, the altar set up, even the menu cards with our names printed in gold. My legs nearly give out. That's impossible. We booked it 6 months ago. My fiancé coordinated everything. The clerk shakes his head slowly. I'm sorry, sir. Maybe you should check with your fiancé in the morning. But there won't be a morning call. Deep down, I already know. The silence isn't an accident. It's an answer. I stumble back to my room and collapse onto the bed. The wedding suit hangs in the closet like a ghost. Her dress, the one I paid $1,200 for, sits in its bag on the chair. Pure white silk with hand-sewn pearls. She looked like an angel when she sent me the photos. Perfect for your perfect bride, she had written. Perfect bride. Perfect lie. I dial her cousin Marga, the only other number I have. It rings twice before a sleepy voice answers. Hello? Marga, it's Eldon, Shanika's fiancé. Is she with you? I haven't heard from her since Tuesday. Long pause. Too long. Oh, hello, Eldon. Shanika. She had to go to Manila. Family emergency. Family emergency? But we're getting married tomorrow. She never mentioned any emergency. It was very sudden. I'm sure she'll call you soon. The line goes quiet except for background noise, voices, someone whispering urgently in Tagalog. Marga, what's going on? Please. I need to know where she is. I have to go, Eldon. I'm sorry. The line goes dead. I stare at the phone screen until it fades to black. Family emergency. But last week, when I asked about her grandmother's health, Shanika said everyone was fine. She said the only thing that mattered was our special day that apparently never existed. The room spins around me. 6 years of saving for retirement, 2 years of video calls, care packages, money transfers, $40,000 sent to the woman I thought would be my wife, the woman who called me her blessing from America and promised to love me until her last breath, the woman who just vanished the night before our wedding like she was never real at all. I walk to the window and look out at the dark city. Somewhere out there, Shenika is living her life without me. Maybe she's laughing about the foolish American who believed her stories. Maybe she's already planning her next performance with some other lonely man. The thought makes me sick. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, I'll be flying home to Montana with a wedding dress I'll never return and a heart I'm not sure will ever heal. But first, I need to know the truth. I need to understand how completely she fooled me. Because right now, sitting in this empty hotel room, I feel like the biggest fool who ever lived. 2 years ago, I was just another divorced trucker eating microwave dinners in a Montana double wide. 40 years on the road, hauling freight from Seattle to Miami. And all I had to show for it was a bad back and a pension that barely covered rent. My ex-wife Sarah had taken half of everything, including our kids' respect. They called maybe twice a year, always needing money, never needing me. You're wasting your life sitting in that trailer. My buddy Joel told me one night over beers, you got good years left. Find someone who'll appreciate what you got to offer. That's when he showed me the website, Filipino Cupid. These women know how to treat a man right, he said, scrolling through profiles of smiling faces. Not like American women. These girls want families, not divorce lawyers. I laughed it off that night. But 3 weeks later, lonely and desperate, I created a profile. My photo was terrible. Gray beard, tired eyes, wearing my lucky trucker cap. I wrote one paragraph. Retired driver looking for real love. No games, no drama. Just want someone to share sunsets with. I expected nothing. Got everything I thought I wanted. She messaged me first. Shenika Alvarez, 28, from Puerto Princesa. Her profile picture stopped my heart. Long black hair, bright eyes, wearing a yellow sundress that made her look like pure sunshine. Hello, sir, her first message read. You look like someone who drives stories. I would love to hear them. Drive stories. Nobody had ever said anything like that to me. Sarah used to complain that I talked too much about the road, but Shenika wanted my stories. We started video calling that same week. Tell me about the mountains, she would say, leaning into the camera, her voice soft and musical. What does it feel like to drive through clouds? I found myself talking for hours. About sunrise over the Rockies, about truck stops in small towns where everybody knew everybody, about the loneliness of the highway when it stretched empty for miles. She listened like my words were poetry. You have such an interesting life, she told me during our 5th call. I work weddings here in Palawan. Beautiful ceremonies, but the couples, they take each other for granted. You wouldn't do that, would you, Eldon? Never, I promised. And I meant it. After 40 years of marriage to someone who saw me as a paycheck with legs, Shenika's attention felt like resurrection. 3 months in, she started calling me pet names. My American cowboy. My strong man. My future happiness. The words made me feel 20 again. I hadn't realized how starved I was for affection until she started feeding it to me daily. I've been thinking, she said during a call in November. Maybe you could visit me for Christmas? I want to show you my world. Meet my family. They already love you from my stories. I booked the flight that night, 15 hours to Manila, then a connecting flight to Puerto Princesa, the longest journey of my life, to meet the woman who was becoming my reason for living. When I finally saw her in person at the airport, wearing that same yellow dress from her photos, I knew I was home. Welcome to paradise, my love, she whispered in my ear as we hugged. She smelled like flowers and possibility. That first visit lasted 2 weeks. She showed me beaches that belonged in magazines, took me to family dinners where everyone treated me like a celebrity, introduced me to her world of wedding planning, where love stories came true every weekend. Her apartment was small but clean, filled with photos of happy couples she'd helped marry. This is what I live for, she said, showing me a wedding album. Making dreams come true, creating forever moments. On my last night, As we walked along the beach under stars I'd never seen from Montana, she took my hand and stopped walking. "Eldon, I need to tell you something." My heart hammered. This was it. She was going to say it had been fun, but I was too old, too simple, too American for her real life. Instead, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "I think I'm falling in love with you." I kissed her, right there on the sand, tasting salt and tears and the promise of everything I'd been missing. "I love you too, Shenika, more than I've ever loved anyone." She smiled and pressed her face against my chest. "Then we'll make our own forever moment. I promise." Flying back to Montana felt like leaving half my soul behind, but we video called every day, and she started talking about our future. Our future. The words I'd given up hope of ever hearing again. "When you're ready," she said 6 months later, "I want to be your wife. I want to take care of you the way you deserve. We could be so happy together, my love." I was ready. God, I was so ready. After decades of feeling invisible, Shanika made me feel like the hero of my own story. She saw something in me that no one else had ever seen, or so I thought. Looking back now, sitting in this empty hotel room, I realized she saw exactly what she was looking for. A lonely man with a bank account and a desperate need to be needed. She saw her ticket out, and I gift-wrapped it for her with a bow. June 11th, she said during our video call last April, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "It's perfect, don't you think? Exactly 2 years from when we first met online. Our anniversary will be so romantic." I nearly dropped the phone. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" She giggled, that musical laugh that made my chest tight with happiness. "I'm asking if you want to marry me, Eldon McCrae, here in Palawan, where we fell in love. I want to be your wife." I couldn't speak. After Sarah, after years of loneliness, after convincing myself I was too old and too boring for love, this beautiful woman wanted to marry me. "Yes," I managed. "God, yes. I want nothing more." Her smile could have powered the whole island. "Then let's plan our dream wedding. I know everything about weddings, remember? I'll make ours perfect." The next 3 months felt like floating. Shanika threw herself into planning with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. She sent me photos constantly. Venue options, flower arrangements, cake designs that looked like art pieces. Every detail coordinated by the woman who'd made wedding dreams come true for dozens of couples. "The Astoria Palawan has availability for June," she told me in May, showing me pictures of an elegant banquet hall with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sea. "It's perfect for us. Not too big, not too small. Intimate and romantic." The venue fee was $3,500. I wired it that afternoon. Money meant nothing compared to her happiness. I'd spent 40 years saving for retirement, but what good was retirement without someone to share it with? "Now for the dress," she said a week later, practically bouncing with excitement. "I found the most beautiful gown, hand-stitched silk with pearl details. It's a little expensive, but Eldon, I'll look like a princess, your princess." She showed me photos of herself in the fitting room, the white silk flowing around her like water. She looked ethereal, perfect, worth every penny of the $1,200 she needed. "You're going to be the most beautiful bride in the Philippines," I told her, and I meant it. The happiness on her face when I sent the money made my heart soar. Then came the invitations, custom-designed cards with our names in gold lettering, elegant script announcing our union. $600 for 50 invitations. "We don't need many," she explained. "Just close family and friends, people who really matter." By the end of May, I'd sent over $8,000 for wedding expenses. Each transfer felt like an investment in our future. Shenika updated me constantly, showing me receipt confirmations, vendor communications, timeline schedules. She had everything organized like the professional she was. "I also need to give something to my parents," she mentioned during a call in early June. "It's tradition here. A gift to thank them for raising me. $1,000 would be appropriate. I sent it immediately. Her parents had welcomed me like a son during my visit. Her mother cooked my favorite dishes. Her father shared stories about his fishing boat. They deserved recognition for raising such an incredible daughter. "You're so generous, my love," Shenika said after the transfer went through. "My parents are crying happy tears. They say you're the son they never had." Every night, she'd call to share new developments. "The flowers are confirmed. White roses and baby's breath, just like you wanted. The photographer will arrive at noon. The priest is so excited to marry us. He says we have special love, the kind that lasts forever. Forever. That word again. It wrapped around my heart like a promise. I can't wait to be Mrs. McRae," she whispered during our last call before I flew to the Philippines. "Can't wait to wake up every morning next to my husband. Can't wait to cook for you, take care of you, love you the way you deserve." I landed in Puerto Princesa on June 8th, 3 days before our wedding. Everything felt magical. The tropical air, the smell of flowers everywhere, the way locals smiled and congratulated me when they heard I was getting married. Even my hotel room overlooked the water where we'd have our reception. Shenika met me at the airport wearing a white blouse and flowing skirt, looking like she was already practicing for her wedding photos. "My husband is here," she announced loudly enough for other passengers to hear. The pride in her voice made me stand taller. "3 more days," she said as we drove through the city. "3 more days and you'll be stuck with me forever." "Can't wait to be stuck," I replied, squeezing her hand. That was Tuesday afternoon. Our last conversation. The last time I heard her voice say my name. The last time I believed in forever. Now, sitting in this hotel room at 3 in the morning, surrounded by wedding preparations for a ceremony that will never happen, I understand what forever really means. It's not the time you spend together. It's the time you spend apart, wondering how someone can vanish from your life as completely as if they never existed. It's the forever you spend learning that the person you loved was just a character in a play, and when the curtain fell, the actress went home to her real life. Forever is how long it takes to realize you've been a fool. The morning sun streaming through my hotel window feels like an insult. It's June 11th, my wedding day, and I'm alone in a room that smells like her perfume, surrounded by evidence of a celebration that will never happen. The wedding dress still hangs in its protective bag, mocking me with its pristine beauty. I can't look at it without feeling sick. I've been awake all night, calling everyone I can think of. Her cousin Marga's phone goes straight to voicemail now. The wedding coordinator hasn't returned my messages. Even the hotel concierge keeps giving me strange looks when I ask about transportation to the Astoria Palawan, like I'm talking about a place that doesn't exist. By 8 a.m., I can't take it anymore. I grab a taxi and give the driver Shenika's address. Maybe she came home. Maybe there's some explanation. Maybe this is all a terrible misunderstanding and she's sitting in her apartment right now, crying because she can't reach me. The building looks different in daylight, smaller, shabbier. The bright yellow paint is peeling, and the stairwell smells like cooking oil and disappointment. I climb to the 3rd floor, my heart hammering against my ribs. Her door is green with brass numbers, 3B. The same door I walked through 6 months ago when she showed me her world. I knock. Nothing. I knock harder. "Shenika, baby, it's me. Open up." A door across the hall creaks open. An elderly woman peers out, her face wrinkled with curiosity and concern. She says something in Tagalog I don't understand, then switches to broken English. "The girl? She go. 2 days now." "Go where?" My voice sounds desperate even to me. The woman shakes her head. "Don't know. She take bag. Big bag. Say goodbye to nobody." The world tilts sideways. She left 2 days ago, the same day she stopped answering my calls, the same day she vanished from my life like smoke. Did she say anything about Manila? About family? Manila? The woman looks confused. "No Manila. She take taxi to airport. I see. Airport. Not Manila. Airport. The pieces start falling into place, each one hitting me like a physical blow. She didn't go to help family. She flew somewhere. Alone. With a big bag. On the day before our wedding, I stumble back downstairs and call another taxi. Take me to her workplace, I tell the driver, showing him the address for Palawan Wedding Dreams, the company where Shenika coordinates events. Maybe her colleagues know where she went. Maybe they can explain what's happening. The office is in a strip mall between a pharmacy and a cell phone repair shop. The sign is faded, like it's been there forever. Inside, a young woman sits behind a desk, cluttered with wedding magazines and fabric samples. She looks up when I enter, her smile automatic and professional. Can I help you, sir? I'm looking for Shenika Alvarez. She works here. I'm her fiancé. The woman's expression shifts, becoming guarded. Oh, you are Eldon. The way she says my name sends chills down my spine, like I'm someone she's heard about but hoped never to meet. Where is she? We're supposed to get married today. Sir, please sit down. She gestures to a plastic chair across from her desk. Shenika doesn't work here anymore. She quit last week. Quit? She never told me she quit. We talked every day. The woman fidgets with a pen, not meeting my eyes. She said she was leaving Palawan, starting over somewhere new. She didn't want anyone to contact her. Starting over? My voice cracks. We're getting married today. We've been planning this for months. I sent money for the venue, for her dress, for everything. The silence stretches between us like a chasm. Finally, she looks up, and I see pity in her eyes. The same pity I saw in the hotel clerk's face, in the neighbor's expression, in every person who's looked at me since Shenika disappeared. Sir, she says gently, Shenika never mentioned a wedding. She never talked about you at all. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. Never mentioned a wedding. Never talked about me. The woman I thought was planning the happiest day of our lives never even told her coworkers I existed. I leave the office in a daze and walk aimlessly through the city. Puerto Princesa bustles with life around me, but I feel like a ghost. Couples hold hands on street corners. Families laugh over lunch at outdoor cafes. Life continues for everyone except me. I'm stuck in some horrible limbo where the woman I love has erased herself from existence and taken my future with her. My phone buzzes with a text from Joel back in Montana. Big day today, buddy. Give the bride my love. Can't wait for photos. I can't answer. How do I explain that there is no bride? That there never was a bride, just an actress playing a role until the final curtain call? How do I tell my best friend that I've been living in a fantasy while reality prepared to destroy me? I find myself at the beach where Shenika and I walked 6 months ago, where she told me she was falling in love with me. The sand is the same, the water just as blue, but everything feels different. That night, I thought I was standing at the beginning of my new life. Now I realize I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and she was the one who pushed me off. A young couple walks past, the woman in a flowing white dress that catches the wind. For a moment, my heart stops, thinking it might be her, but it's not. It's just another bride, probably on her way to a real wedding with a real groom, who isn't sitting alone on a beach, wondering how he became such a fool. I pull out my phone and stare at her number. Still disconnected. I try her Facebook again. Still gone. It's like she never existed except in my imagination and my bank statements. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. This was supposed to be our first sunset as husband and wife. Instead, it's the sunset of the day I learned that love can be a lie so complete, so perfectly performed, that you never see the truth until the performer has left the stage. I stand up and brush sand from my clothes. Tomorrow I'll book a flight home. Tonight, I need to figure out how to pack up the wreckage of what I thought was my life and somehow find the strength to keep breathing. But right now, watching the sun disappear into the Philippine Sea, all I can do is whisper her name into the wind and hope it carries my questions to wherever she's gone. Why Shenika? Why did you have to destroy me to save yourself? The wind doesn't answer. It never does. Back in my hotel room, staring at the wedding dress I'll never see her wear, the memories come flooding back like a dam bursting. All those little moments I brushed off, all those questions I didn't ask, all those red flags I painted green because I was so desperate to believe in us. The first one was subtle. 3 months into our relationship, I asked for a receipt from the jewelry store where she was supposedly getting her engagement ring resized. "Why do you need to see that, my love?" she had asked, her voice just a little too sharp. "Don't you trust me?" Of course I trusted her. That was the whole point. I just like to keep records for my taxes. I lied, not wanting to admit I was feeling uncertain about the money I'd been sending. "Receipts are so boring," she laughed, deflecting with that musical giggle that made me forget my concerns. "I threw it away already, but don't worry, your ring is safe. Soon you'll put it on my finger forever, forever." She used that word like a weapon, slicing through my doubts before they could fully form. I never saw that receipt. Then there was the venue situation. In April, she told me our wedding would be at the Astoria Palawan. By May, she was excited about a better option at the Pearl Farm Resort. When I asked about the deposit I'd already paid for the Astoria, she got defensive again. "Baby, you worry too much about money," she said during a video call, her beautiful face suddenly cold. "I'm handling everything. Don't you want our wedding to be perfect?" "Of course, but..." "Then trust me. I know weddings. This is what I do for a living." I shut up after that. She was the professional. I was just a retired trucker who didn't know anything about planning elegant events. But now I remember the way her eyes shifted when she said it, like she was reading from a script. The biggest red flag came during my visit in December. We were having dinner with her family, and I casually mentioned how excited I was about our June wedding. The table went quiet. Her Uncle Miguel looked confused. "Wedding?" he asked in broken English. "What wedding?" Shenika jumped in quickly, laughing nervously. "Oh, Uncle Miguel, I told you. Eldon and I are thinking about maybe getting married next year. Nothing definite yet. Nothing definite. But just 2 days earlier, she'd been showing me color swatches for table linens and asking whether I preferred orchids or roses for centerpieces. When I tried to bring it up later, she kissed me quiet. "My uncle drinks too much," she whispered against my lips. "He forgets things. Don't worry about him, my love." I believed her because I wanted to, because the alternative that she was lying to everyone, including me, was too painful to consider. My buddy Joel tried to warn me in March when I showed him photos of Shenika's dress fitting. "Don't take this wrong, Eldon, but are you sure this girl's not just after your money? These overseas relationships, they're not always what they seem." "She loves me, Joel," I snapped, defensive and angry. "Not every woman is like Sarah. Some actually care about more than bank accounts. I'm just saying, $40,000 is a lot of wedding expenses. Maybe ask for some proof that..." "Proof?" I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. "I don't need proof. I need support from my friends." Joel raised his hands in surrender. Okay. If you're happy, I'm happy. Just be careful." But I wasn't careful. I was desperate. Desperate to believe that a beautiful young woman could love a broken-down trucker with nothing to offer except Social Security checks and a lifetime of loneliness. When you're drowning, you'll grab onto anything that looks like a lifeline, even if it's just an illusion. The money should have been the biggest clue. $8,000 in 3 months for a wedding that was supposed to be simple and intimate. When I questioned the costs, she, always mining free, had explanations ready. "Everything is more expensive during wedding season," she said when the flower budget doubled. "But don't worry, my love. We only get married once. It should be special. The photographer wants an extra $1,000 for edited albums," she told me in May. "But the samples he showed me are like artwork. Our memories deserve the best." Every expense came with a story, a reason, a justification wrapped in love language that made me feel selfish for questioning it. I was paying for our future, our happiness, our forever. How could I put a price on that? Looking back now, I see how perfectly she played me. Every doubt I expressed was met with wounded feelings or passionate reassurance. Every question about money was deflected with talk about trust and love. Every red flag was repainted as proof of her dedication to making our wedding perfect. She knew exactly what I needed to hear, that I was handsome, successful, worthy of love, that she felt lucky to have found me, that our age difference didn't matter because I was more mature and stable than boys her age. She fed my ego while emptying my wallet, and I thanked her for both. The cruelest part is that I knew, deep down, underneath all the hope and desperation, I knew something wasn't right. But knowing and accepting are two different things. I chose to live in the fantasy because reality that I was alone, unlovable, too damaged for real relationship was unbearable. So I ignored the stories that didn't add up. I dismissed the concerns of people who cared about me. I chose love over logic, hope over evidence, dreams over truth. And now, sitting in this empty hotel room with a wedding dress I'll never see worn and a ring that will never find its finger, I understand the most painful lesson of all. I didn't fall for a scam. I fell for what I wanted to believe was love. And sometimes, that's the same thing. I couldn't sleep again. By 4 a.m. on June 12th, I was pacing the hotel room like a caged animal, my mind racing through possibilities that all led to the same dark conclusion. She was gone, really gone, but I needed proof. I needed to know for certain that this wasn't some horrible misunderstanding. That's when I remembered Joel's cousin Marcus. He works for TSA back in Montana, has access to passenger manifests and flight records. I called him at what would have been late evening his time, my hand shaking as I dialed. Eldon? Jesus, what time is it there? Marcus sounded groggy, confused. Marcus, I need a favor. A big one. Can you check if someone flew out of Puerto Princesa in the last few days? This about your girlfriend? Joel mentioned you were getting married today. The words stuck in my throat. The wedding didn't happen. She disappeared. I think she flew somewhere, but I need to know for sure. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Eldon, you know I can't just, please. My voice broke. I sent her $40,000, Marcus. Everything I had saved for. Retirement. If she scammed me, I need to know. I need proof so I can figure out what to do next. Another pause. Give me her full name and date of birth. Shenica Alvarez, born March 15th, 1997. Hang on, let me see what I can find. The next 10 minutes felt like hours. I could hear typing in the background, the sound of someone breaking rules to help a desperate fool understand how completely he'd been played. Eldon? Marcus's voice was gentle, the way people sound when they're about to deliver bad news. I found her. My heart stopped. Where did she go? Singapore. Singapore Airlines Flight SQ-178 on June 9th at 11:45 p.m. One-way ticket. June 9th, 2 days before our wedding. 2 days before she was supposed to walk down the aisle and promise to love me forever. She was already gone, already in another country, while I was still believing in our future. One way? I whispered. Yeah, man. I'm sorry. No return flight booked. Did she travel alone? As far as I can tell. Just her name on the manifest. I thanked Marcus and hung up, then sat on the edge of the bed staring at the phone. Singapore. She flew to Singapore on a one-way ticket while I was planning our honeymoon, while I was practicing my wedding vows, while I was dreaming about our life together. Singapore is a hub. From there, you can fly anywhere in the world. London, Sydney, Dubai, New York. She could be anywhere now, living her real life with the money I gave her for our fake future. I pulled up Google on my phone and searched for flights from Singapore. The possibilities were endless. Hundreds of destinations, dozens of airlines, infinite ways to disappear forever. She hadn't just run from me. She'd run from the entire country, taking everything I'd given her and leaving nothing behind except the dress hanging in my closet. The hotel phone rang, making me jump. For one insane moment, I thought it might be her. Maybe she was calling to explain, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. I grabbed the receiver like a lifeline. "Hello? Mr. McCrae? This is Elena at the front desk. You have a visitor." My heart hammered. "A visitor?" "A lady. Says she's your fiancé's cousin. Marga." Maybe she had answers. Maybe she knew where Shenika went, why she left, what really happened. I told Elena to send her up, then paced the room waiting for the elevator to stop on my floor. The knock was soft, hesitant. I opened the door to find a woman in her 30s, shorter than Shenika but with similar features. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying. "Marga?" She nodded and stepped into the room, glancing around at the wedding preparations with obvious discomfort. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Eldon. I know this is difficult. Where is she?" I didn't have patience for pleasantries. "Where did Shenika go?" Marga sat down heavily in the chair by the window, avoiding eye contact. "She asked me not to tell you. She said it would be easier if you just moved on." "Easier?" Rage flared in my chest. "She took $40,000 from me, Marga. We were supposed to get married yesterday. Nothing about this is easy." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I told her it was wrong. I told her she couldn't do this to you. But she did it anyway. She was scared. Scared of being trapped here forever. Scared of being poor. Scared of never having chances." Marga finally looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "She said you would understand eventually. That you would be happier without her." "Happier?" I laughed bitterly. "She destroyed me, Marga. She made me believe she loved me, then vanished like I meant nothing. She did love you." The words came out in a rush. "Not the way you wanted, maybe, but she cared about you. She cried when she decided to leave." "Then why did she leave? If she cared, if she loved me, why did she take my money and run?" Marga stood up abruptly, as if staying any longer would be dangerous. "Because love wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. She wanted things you couldn't give her, a life she couldn't have here. The money was her ticket out." "To where?" "I don't know. She said somewhere new. Somewhere she could start over and be someone different." Marga moved toward the door. "She asked me to give you this." She pulled an envelope from her purse and set it on the table. My name was written on the front in Shenika's careful handwriting. The same handwriting that had signed love letters, that had written forever in the margins of wedding plans. "I have to go," Marga said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Eldon. I'm so sorry this happened to you." She left me alone with the envelope. I stared at it for an hour, afraid to open it, afraid of what final cruelty it might contain. When I finally tore it open, there was just one sheet of hotel stationery and a few brief lines. "Eldon, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I know you hate me now, and you have every right to. I never meant to hurt you, but I couldn't live the life you wanted for us. Thank you for everything you gave me. I hope someday you can forgive me." That was it. No explanation, no apology for the money, no acknowledgement of the future she'd destroyed. Just a few sentences that felt like they'd been written by a stranger. The woman who called me her forever, who sent me love messages every morning, who promised to cherish me until her last breath, had reduced our entire relationship to a casual goodbye note. I crumpled the letter and threw it across the room. 2 years of my life, $40,000 of my retirement, and all the love I had left to give, and she summarized it in 3 sentences. Like I was a hotel guest checking out, not the man who thought he was going to spend the rest of his life loving her. But the worst part wasn't the brevity of her goodbye. It was the realization that hit me as I sat there surrounded by the remnants of our fake future. She hadn't just stolen my money. She'd stolen my ability to trust, to hope, to believe that someone could love me for who I was rather than what I could provide. The Singapore flight confirmed what my heart already knew. There had never been a wedding. There had never been a future. There had only been a performance so convincing that I'd forgotten I was watching a show until the actress took her final bow and disappeared into the night. I walked to the closet and touched the plastic bag protecting her wedding dress. $1,200 of pure white silk that would never see a church, never feel her body inside it, never be part of the happiest day of anyone's life. It was just another prop in the elaborate theater she'd created to separate me from my money and my dreams. Tomorrow, I would pack this dress in my suitcase and carry it home to Montana like a ghost. I would hang it in my closet, where it would remind me every day of how completely someone can fool you when you want so desperately to be loved. But tonight, on what should have been the first night of our honeymoon, all I could do was sit in this empty hotel room and try to understand how the woman who promised me forever had planned her escape before we even set our wedding date. Singapore. She was living her new life in Singapore while I was dying my old death in Palawan. And somehow, that distance felt like the most honest thing she'd ever given me. I couldn't let it end with a note. 3 weeks after returning to Montana, 3 weeks of sleepless nights and unanswered questions, I sat in my trailer staring at my laptop screen. I'd found her email address buried in our old correspondence, and my fingers hovered over the keyboard like I was defusing a bomb. What do you say to someone who destroyed your life? How do you summarize the magnitude of betrayal in a few paragraphs? I started typing and deleting, until finally the words came out raw and true. Shanika, I need you to know something. I would have married you, with nothing. If you'd told me you were broke, desperate, trapped, I would have brought you to America and helped you build whatever life you wanted. I didn't fall in love with your wedding plans or your family or your promises about the future. I fell in love with you, the person I thought you were. If you'd asked me for help instead of lying to me for 2 years, I would have given you everything anyway. But you chose to steal it instead. You chose to make me feel like a fool instead of a man who loved you. I don't understand why you had to destroy me to save yourself. All I wanted was to love you. I still would, if you'd been honest. But you turned love into theft, and now I don't know if I'll ever trust anyone again. I hope the money was worth it. I hope Singapore gives you everything Montana couldn't, and I hope someday you remember that there was a man who would have died for you, and you killed him anyway. Eldon. I hit send before I could lose my nerve, then closed the laptop, and tried to forget I'd ever written it. She wouldn't respond. Why would she? She had what she wanted, and I had nothing left to offer. But 2 days later, my phone chimed with an email notification. My heart stopped when I saw her name in the inbox. After weeks of silence, after disappearing completely from my life, she'd actually responded. I stared at the subject line for 10 minutes before opening it. Why? Just those 2 words that encompassed everything I'd been feeling since she vanished. Her response was shorter than my desperate letter, clinical and cold in a way that made me feel like I was reading a business transaction rather than the end of a relationship. Eldon, I got your email. I'm sorry you're hurt, but you need to understand something. I couldn't live in Montana. I couldn't be the wife you wanted, cooking your meals and watching TV in a trailer while the world passed us by. I'm 28 years old. I have dreams, ambitions, places I want to see. You offered me a cage, painted gold and called it love. I needed freedom, not marriage. The money was the only way I could get it. You're a good man, and I did care about you, but caring isn't the same as wanting to spend my life in a place that felt like dying slowly. I hope you understand someday. Take care of yourself. Shanika. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. She couldn't live in Montana. She couldn't be the wife I wanted. She needed freedom. Like I was some prison warden who'd kidnapped her dreams instead of a man who'd offered to share his life. The cruelest part was how reasonable she made it sound, how she painted herself as the victim of my expectations rather than the architect of my destruction. She'd lied to me for 2 years, stolen $40,000, and vanished without explanation. But somehow I was the problem, because I wanted a traditional life in a small town. I wanted to write back. I wanted to scream at her through the computer that she could have told me the truth from the beginning, that I would have helped her pursue her dreams in America, that I never would have trapped her anywhere she didn't want to be. But what was the point? She'd already rewritten our entire relationship in her mind, turning herself into a victim and me into an obstacle she'd had to overcome. Instead, I saved her email in a folder marked evidence and tried to move on, but her words haunted me. You offered me a cage painted gold and called it love. Is that what I'd done? Had I been so desperate for companionship that I'd tried to buy her affection instead of earning it? Late at night, when the trailer felt too quiet and the loneliness pressed in from all sides, I'd replay every conversation we'd had about the future. I'd told her I wanted to take care of her, to give her everything she needed, to make her happy. I thought I was being romantic. She apparently thought I was being controlling. But then I'd remember the lies, the fake venue, the disappearing receipts, the family who didn't know about our wedding, the careful way she'd extracted money from me month after month while planning her escape. If she'd really just wanted freedom, she could have broken up with me. She didn't have to rob me on her way out the door. 2 weeks later, I tried calling the Singapore number I'd found in her old messages. It was disconnected. I searched for her on social media under every name combination I could think of. Nothing. She'd vanished from the digital world as completely as she'd vanished from my life. That's when I realized the most devastating truth of all. She was right about one thing. She had needed freedom. Freedom from me, from Montana, from the life I'd offered. But she'd taken more than her freedom when she left. She'd taken my ability to offer that life to anyone else. She'd taken my trust, my hope, my belief in love itself. Her final email had been a goodbye, disguised as an explanation. She wasn't asking for forgiveness or offering closure. She was telling me to let her go and move on. But how do you move on from someone who rewrote the story of your relationship to make herself the hero and you the villain? How do you heal from betrayal when the person who betrayed you thinks they were just escaping? I printed her email and put it in the same folder as our wedding receipts, our chat logs, and the photos she'd sent me of the dress I'd bought her. Evidence of the most expensive education I'd ever received. 2 years and $40,000 to learn that love and money make a toxic combination, and that sometimes the person you're trying to save is actually the one destroying you. She got her freedom. I got the bill. And somehow, in her version of events, that made perfect sense. The flight home from Puerto Princesa was 17 hours of hell. I sat in seat 23B with Shenika's wedding dress folded in the overhead compartment and her ring burning a hole in my carry-on bag. Every time the plane hit turbulence, I thought about how easy it would be to just not wear my seatbelt, how simple it would be to let physics solve the problem of living with this humiliation. But I'm too much of a coward for that kind of exit. So I sat there, surrounded by families heading home from vacation and business travelers who looked like they had their lives figured out, and tried to pretend I wasn't the stupidest man who ever lived. The woman next to me tried to make conversation during the layover in Tokyo. "Vacation?" she asked, nodding toward my suitcase. "Wedding," I replied without thinking. "Oh, how wonderful. Yours?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I could have said yes and let her congratulate me. I could have said no and avoided the whole conversation. Instead, I told the truth. Was supposed to be. Bride changed her mind. Her face went through several expressions before settling on uncomfortable pity. "I'm so sorry. That must be devastating." Devastating. Like a hurricane or a cancer diagnosis. Something that happens to you, not something you pay for and participate in. I nodded and put my headphones on, ending the conversation before she could ask more questions I couldn't answer. Landing in Montana felt like returning from the dead. Joel was waiting at baggage claim, his face carefully neutral in the way people look when they're trying not to stare at a car accident. "Good flight?" he asked as we walked to his truck. It was a flight. We drove in silence for 20 minutes before he finally spoke again. "You want to talk about it?" "Nothing to talk about. She's gone. Money's gone. Wedding's gone. End of story. But Joel knew me too well to accept that. $40,000, Eldon. You can't just write that off as a learning experience. What am I supposed to do? Hire a lawyer? File a police report? She's in Singapore or God knows where by now. The money's gone. You could at least warn other guys. Post about it online. Make sure she can't do this to someone else. I'd thought about that during the long flight home. Imagined writing detailed posts on every dating site, every forum, every place where lonely men go looking for love. I could share her photos, her real name, the story of how completely she'd fooled me. I could turn my humiliation into ammunition and hope it protected some other fool from making my mistakes. But what would that accomplish? Make me feel better? Make her feel worse? Or just advertise to the world that Eldon McCrae was stupid enough to send his life savings to a woman who never loved him? I'm done, Joel, with all of it. Dating, relationships, believing in happy endings. I'm 61 years old, and I just learned the most expensive lesson of my life. I'm not interested in teaching it to anyone else. He dropped me at my trailer and helped me carry in my suitcase. The place looked exactly the same, but felt different. Smaller somehow. Like it had shrunk while I was gone. Or maybe I had. The photographs I'd hung of Shenika and me during my visit were still on the walls, still smiling their fake smiles from their cheap frames. You going to be okay? Joel asked before leaving. I'm still breathing. That's something. After he left, I stood in my living room looking at those photos. There was one of us on the beach where she'd told me she loved me. Another from her family's dinner table where everyone had welcomed me like a son. A third from our last morning together, both of us grinning at the camera like we'd won the lottery. They all looked so real, so genuine. Her smile, the way she looked at me, the happiness in her eyes. If I hadn't lived through what came next, I would have sworn those emotions were authentic. But now they looked like evidence from a crime scene, proof of how perfectly she'd played her part. I took the photos down one by one and put them in a box with everything else she'd left behind. The letters she'd sent, the screenshots of our video calls, the fake receipts for wedding expenses. A complete archive of the most convincing lie I'd ever experienced. The wedding dress went in my bedroom closet, still in its protective bag. I told myself I'd return it, or donate it, or throw it away. But months passed, and it stayed there. A ghost in white silk, haunting the space where I slept. People in town started asking questions. Where was my Filipino bride? How was married life? When would I bring her to Montana? I gave different answers depending on my mood. Sometimes she decided to stay in the Philippines with her family. Sometimes the visa process was more complicated than expected. Sometimes I just said it didn't work out and changed the subject. The truth was too pathetic to share. How do you tell your neighbors that you're the kind of fool who sends his retirement savings to a woman he met online? How do you admit that you confused loneliness with love and paid $40,000 for the privilege of being abandoned? Easier to just let people think the relationship had faded naturally. Let them assume cultural differences or distance had killed the romance. Let them forget I'd ever mentioned a wedding at all. But I couldn't forget. Every morning I woke up and remembered for a few seconds that I was supposed to be married now. Supposed to be cooking breakfast for two, planning trips to show her America, helping her adjust to life as my wife. Instead, I made coffee for one and tried to figure out how to fill another empty day. The worst part wasn't the money, though that hurt plenty. My retirement fund was devastated, my dreams of traveling and living comfortably erased. I'd have to work part-time jobs for years just to get back to where I'd been before I met her. The worst part was the silence. After 2 years of daily phone calls, constant messages, feeling needed and wanted and loved, the quiet was deafening. My phone never rang. My inbox stayed empty. Nobody called me my love or asked about my day or shared their dreams with me. I was alone in a way I'd never been alone before. Not just single, but broken. Not just lonely, but convinced I deserved to be. Because what kind of man falls for such an obvious lie? What kind of fool mistakes manipulation for affection and pays $40,000 for the education? The kind of man I apparently was. The kind who would rather believe in a beautiful lie than face an ugly truth. The kind who confuse need with love and desperation with romance. The kind who probably deserved exactly what he got. 6 months after returning from the Philippines, I did something I swore I'd never do. I joined a support group for men who'd been scammed by overseas women. It met every Thursday night in the basement of St. Matthew's Lutheran Church in Billings. Folding chairs arranged in a circle, coffee that tasted like motor oil, and 8 other guys who'd learned the same expensive lesson I had. "My name is Eldon," I said during my first meeting, my voice barely above a whisper, "and I sent $40,000 to a woman who disappeared the night before our wedding." The facilitator, a therapist named Dr. Martinez, nodded encouragingly. "Thank you for sharing, Eldon. How are you feeling about that today?" How was I feeling? Like the biggest fool who ever lived. Like I deserved what happened to me. Like I'd never trust another human being as long as I lived. "I feel stupid," I said finally. "Stupid is a judgment," Dr. Martinez replied. "What emotions are underneath that judgment?" I thought about it. Underneath the self-hatred and embarrassment, what was really there? Angry, sad, afraid it'll happen again. "Those are normal responses to betrayal," she said. "Would you like to tell the group about her?" So I did. I told them about Shenika's smile, her laugh, the way she called me her forever husband. I told them about the fake wedding venue, the disappearing receipts, the one-way ticket to Singapore. I told them about waking up in a hotel room on my wedding day, surrounded by preparations for a ceremony that would never happen. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then Gary, a retired plumber from Great Falls, spoke up. "Mine was named Rosa, from Cebu City. We were supposed to meet in person, but her grandmother got sick and needed surgery. $3,000 for the operation, $2,000 for hospital costs, another $1,000 for medication. Then she disappeared." "Carmen from Manila," said another man. "Her brother got arrested and needed bail money. $5,000. Never heard from her again." One by one, they shared their stories. Different names, different cities, different emergencies, but the same ending. Money sent, promises broken, hearts shattered by women who'd made lying into an art form. "The thing is," said Frank, a rancher who'd lost $20,000 to a woman from Davao, "I still love her. Even knowing what she did, part of me still loves the person I thought she was." Everyone nodded. That was the cruelest part of the whole thing. We hadn't just been robbed. We'd been made to fall in love with characters in a play. And when the curtain fell, the actresses went home to their real lives while we sat in the empty theater wondering what had happened to the people we'd loved. "Do any of you still have contact with them?" Dr. Martinez asked. Most of the men shook their heads. But I reached into my shirt and pulled out the chain I'd started wearing. Hanging from it was the engagement ring I'd bought for Shenika. A simple diamond solitaire that had cost me 2 months' worth of Social Security. "I wear this," I said, holding up the ring. "Not because I want her back, because I need to remember." "Remember what, Doctor?" Martinez asked gently. How far I fell. How completely I believed in something that wasn't real. I wear it so I'll never be that vulnerable again. The group met every Thursday for 12 weeks. I listened to stories that mirrored my own, shared details I'd never told anyone, and slowly started to understand that I wasn't uniquely stupid. Lonely people make desperate choices. Desperate people ignore obvious warning signs, and predators like Shenika know exactly how to exploit that combination. But understanding doesn't equal healing. Even after the group sessions ended, I still woke up some mornings expecting to find a message from her. Still caught myself looking for her face in crowds. Still felt my heart skip when I saw a young woman with long black hair and a bright smile. I got a part-time job at the hardware store to start rebuilding my finances. Started going to church again, partly for the community but mostly for something to do on Sunday mornings. Began watching old movies instead of the romantic comedies that reminded me of what I'd lost. The other men from the support group stayed in touch. We'd meet for coffee sometimes, share updates on our slow recovery, remind each other that we weren't alone in our stupidity. It helped, having people who understood what it felt like to be systematically dismantled by someone you trusted. But the ring stayed on the chain around my neck. Dr. Martinez had suggested I might consider removing it eventually, when I felt ready to move forward. The other guys in the group had thrown away photos, deleted phone numbers, burned letters. They'd chosen to erase their scammers from their lives completely. I couldn't do that, not because I still loved Shanika, but because I needed the weight of that ring against my chest every day. A reminder that love and money don't mix, that desperation makes you blind, that some people will destroy you just to improve their own lives, and they'll sleep perfectly well afterward. My nephew visited from Denver a year after the wedding that never happened. He was 25, newly engaged, full of hope about his future, with a girl he'd met in college. "You ever think about dating again, Uncle Eldon?" he asked over dinner. "I mean, not all women are like that Filipino lady. There are plenty of good ones right here in Montana." I touched the ring through my shirt and smiled sadly. "Maybe someday, but not yet. What are you waiting for?" Good question. What was I waiting for? For the pain to fade completely? For the ability to trust again? For some guarantee that I'd never be that foolish twice? "I'm waiting to be someone who won't make the same mistakes," I said finally. "Someone who can tell the difference between love and loneliness. Between what's real and what I want to be real. You think that'll happen?" I didn't know. Some days I felt stronger, more aware, protected by the hard lessons Shenika had taught me. Other days I felt like I'd been permanently broken, like the part of me that could believe in happy endings had been surgically removed. "Maybe," I told my nephew, "ask me again in a few years." But I kept wearing the ring. It had become part of me by then, as essential as my heartbeat, not a symbol of love lost, but of wisdom gained at a price too high for anyone to pay. A reminder that some educations cost everything you have, and the only way to honor that investment is to make sure you never need to learn the same lesson twice. The woman who called herself Shenika was probably married by now, or running a business in Singapore, or living in Australia, or Canada, or anywhere her stolen dreams had carried her. I hoped she was happy. I really did, because one of us should be. As for me, I was learning to be content with being awake to the difference between want and need, awake to the red flags I'd ignored, awake to the reality that love doesn't cost $40,000, and anyone who prices it that high is selling something else entirely. The ring around my neck reminded me of that every day, and maybe, eventually, that would be enough to set me free.